ranking member and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to attend this hearing. It's an honor to be here before you. The Uyghur Human Rights Project commends the subcommittee for convening this hearing on the U.S. policy response. We would also like to express our appreciation to the subcommittee members who have co-signed the bipartisan letters calling for sanctions and urgent pressure for the release of the relatives of Uyghur American citizens. The human rights emergency facing Uyghur people in China requires an urgent response. For decades, the Chinese government implemented policies of racial discrimination, criminalization of Uyghurs' distinct ethnic and religious identity. In the 2 years since the new party secretary took office, we have seen how these policies paved the way for dehumanization of the Uyghur people. This should raise an urgent alarm about what is next for the Uyghur people in China. It is also important to be clear about the Chinese government's claim to be carrying out counterterrorism campaign, which is nonsense. Prior to 9/11, Chinese government justified repressive policies by claiming to be fighting separatism. Hundreds of political prisoners were locked away for expressing their identity or peacefully protesting government abuse and corruption. After 9/11, the same policies were suddenly recast as counterterrorism. Today, it's very clear that these policies have nothing to do with security concerns. Most obvious evidence is the large-scale facilities being built to keep Uyghur children under state control from preschool age. As we speak, millions of Uyghurs don't know if they will ever see their parents, sons, daughters, and their young nieces, nephews ever again. Finally, the United States government must respond vigorously to threats and retaliation against the American citizens of Uyghur origin on U.S. soil. It is time to act. My recommendations for the Congress as follows. 1, to guide policy through the government, we urge the subcommittee to introduce a binding resolution endorsing an urgent U.S. policy response to the Uyghur crisis. The long overdue Uyghur Policy Act is needed to definitely state U.S. support for Uyghurs' civil and political rights and to mandate adequate measures to reverse the current crisis. The Congress should also press for an immediate congressional fact-finding visit to the Uyghur region. Ambassador Branstad should personally lead efforts for the release of the Uyghur American citizens' relatives in China. We also endorse the enforcement of the Magnitsky Act and the going after the companies, individuals assisting the Chinese state security agencies. Congress should also review the U.S.-China law enforcement cooperation. American officials need to use this channel to vigorously raise the shocking treatment of Uyghurs by China's security forces. Law enforcement agencies should also investigate threats and retaliations carried out against Uyghur Americans and other Uyghurs living in the United States. The United States should publicly affirm its policy not to extradite or deport Uyghurs living in the U.S. and urge other governments to join Germany and Sweden by publicly announcing a halt to all deportation of Uyghurs to China. 7, Congress should appropriate funds to support Uyghur human rights and civil society groups working to advance human rights and environmental protection in their homeland. 10, U.S. delegation at the United Nations should have strong congressional backing for vigorous action. China has been in a hot seat for its crimes against humanity in the Uyghur region exactly once in the last 19 months, which was August 10th at the third review panel in Geneva. Going forward, U.S. must field a strong delegation at China's UPR review on November 6th. Finally, we know of Uyghur students who cannot pay their tuition at American universities because their parents are detained in China. In this humanitarian urgency, members of Congress should support these students' request for tuition waiver and scholarship. In conclusion, I'd like to reiterate my gratitude to the U.S. Congress for the bipartisan support and its effort to hold human rights abusers in China to account. Thank you again for the opportunity to shine more lights on the tragic situation facing the Uyghur people in China. Thank you.